Hey guys, welcome back to Star City Talks. I'm here today with Nana from Is It a Hit?
Hey, what's up, man? You good?
I'm good, bro. How are you, man?
I'm good.
Good. Myself and Nana go way back.
Yep.
Brothers for a long time. Nana's here today to talk to us about some of the things he does and some of the ways in which Nana empowers and helps artists and creatives get their work out there. So we'll really just jump straight into it. And I suppose to introduce Nana, Nana works really deeply with music marketing and digital marketing.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, basically, as you know, music has always been like my foundation.
Yeah.
You know? And primarily, I always will class myself as an artist. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, to a certain extent, there's an appreciation of music, and throughout my journey to the point where I am now, you know, I've learned and acquired skills along the way. Do you know what I mean? In terms of content creation, making music videos for people at a time, documentaries and everything. And that then kind of evolved into the marketing side of things, digital marketing in specific. And that was basically what kind of glued everything together. Right. You know, as a musician, really, at this day of age, you know, obviously you got a high quality song of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you need to create content for that song.
That's right.
And then you got to market it.
Yeah. Yeah. The triad, if you will. The trio, yeah.
But I mean, my method has always been like, you know, the only limitation is your imagination. Really. And to a certain extent, like, you know, I'm sure lots of artists have gone through this, that they feel like they're dependent on someone to get something done or whatever, you know. And I just took that step to actually learn how to do those things. So fast forward everything, you know, I've kind of come back, and what I want to do is kind of share that kind of knowledge and education, because again, as an artist, you go to somebody who wants to promote your music and everything, and they're like the big boss and stuff, you know, you do it our way, you know, we've got all of this and stuff. And sometimes, you know, it's not real. Sometimes, you know, in my case, it didn't really work out for me. So that's like, what's the value of that, you know? Yeah. But most importantly, for me, it was just like, you know, they didn't really give me any value, even in terms of data or anything like that. How can I improve myself for next time?
Right.
Why did it go wrong?
Yeah.
Or to a certain extent, why did it go right?
Yeah. Which actually is is a very interesting point, because we now live in a culture, particularly in this music industry, where data actually is king. Data rules. In that, whilst you can, as a creative, feel a certain way about your product, your song, it's the data will be far more truthful with you than your own feelings on whether or not this is actually a hit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think obviously anyone creating will always create from the place where they want the song or the piece to be as good as it can possibly be. But also, you'll know if you do that every time, if you do that 10 times in a few weeks, and put out all of those things that you've put the same effort into, the data will still give you very, very different analysis as to what was received better by your audience, right? So I suppose what you're saying is that data is essentially what you weren't provided with.
Yeah.
And what is necessary for an artist to thrive.
Maybe at a time it wasn't as easily as accessible as it is right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is that even then, there could be reasons why certain things didn't work, you know? Yeah. And even just to get understanding of how you can get that learnings to improve for the next one, you know? So in terms of what I'm doing now, it's just like, yes, I do promote people's music, you know, they come to me. And first of all, I got to like the music. You know, I just can't.
Right.
I can't put my heart and soul into something. And again, as you know, music has always been my my main primary go-to. However, I am also quite subjective, because obviously with music, it not necessarily be my taste, but it could be other people's taste. So I don't necessarily kind of, even if I don't like it to a certain extent, I mean, if I can't work with it, or I can't work with the people who are pushing it, then I will not really take it on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean,
if it's something that I don't like, but if I can still see a vision in it,
Yeah.
I will take it.
Right. I was going to say, because there's got to be something that you are checking off in terms of quality, at
Yeah.
least, right? So you're looking for a certain level of quality. I suppose you're in a position where you're having to, first and foremost, enjoy the music.
Yeah.
And if it's something
100%.
that you can't necessarily, if it's not something that you would add to your own playlist on a personal note, you're then, the next level is to go, right, well, this is a quality record, and then you're objectively saying this could appeal to someone, even if it doesn't appeal to myself.
Yeah. I see, the thing is, the kind of, you mentioned the kind of things that I look at artists, even just to work with to a certain extent, is obviously they got to be really good. They got to be good to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Or at least you can feel like they could be rough around the edges and stuff, but you can see that potential. Talent. Okay?
Sure.
Important. But the next thing is kind of like more about like work ethic. So if it, to a certain extent, if there's a particular deadline, will you be able to finish by that deadline? If I say, look, I need at least 7 bits of content, 10 bits of content for me to do some testing on, will you provide me those 10 bits of content in the time that when I need it? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's very important,
Yeah.
It's like, because if artists want me or our team to basically do something, put our heart and soul in it, we need the assets, we need all the things in order for us to put in the work. And if they're not prepared to even do that, then that's something I'll be like, you know what, I'll move on to the next person.
So there's a level of sophistication and organization that this artist also needs to be able to demonstrate. So we go past talent, absolutely necessary prerequisite.
Yeah.
Good song, same thing.
Yeah.
We then get to the third level, which is this artist now needs to show up and actually be more than talented, more than I accidentally stumbled upon this.
Yeah.
And intentional with their commitment to work with you.
Yes, I mean, I'll break it down even more so. You actually said it earlier. You got to be organized. You said sophistication, something like sophistication and organization. I'll be more on organization in the brain. For example, if I said like, I need bits of content and everything, they're not necessarily be the ones to actually create the content. Ideally, I'd like them to create the content, but if they say, you know what, I can do realistic, I can get them realistically at this date, at this time, and he delivers or she delivers, that's good. It's organization, very, very basic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's, especially in this day and age, that there's a lot more that's basically required from an artist, right?
Yeah.
And they can go either two routes, whether it's like, they do it themselves, or they have a team of some kind. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I personally would go for do it ourselves, but as well as that, having a team is just as important as well.
Yeah. We had a question about that.
Yeah.
What is? Does an artist, and for the time being, let's also put producers. I want to put producers in the same category because producers have to work in the same way as artists these days.
Yeah.
To even collaborate with artists, to get seen, to get noticed, all of that stuff. So I want to put them in. Do artists and producers need a team? And do you recommend one? And would you personally recommend one for the upcoming?
Okay, in terms of if they need a manager.
I didn't say manager.
Okay. Or do they need a team?
Team. Because obviously now a manager technically would be part of that team, yes.
Yeah.
But would you, is that...
Okay,
how do you feel about it?
Does an artist require a team at this stage of time?
Yeah.
Again, I'll probably say it's depending on the artist or the band or whatever, okay? Now, I personally don't think they will need a team until they can really master what they can do by themselves. Okay? Because sometimes, because you'd be surprised what people can do by themselves if they really put their minds to it. Yeah. Sometimes people don't have that level of, they're just not really wired like that. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's depending on the person. I personally would say for artists, like obviously master your craft as an artist, but at the same time, like maybe try and create your own content, film something, or like if you know Logic and all that type of stuff, then surely you'll be able to know how to use CapCut or Premiere. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like
those
if
are
you
basic
can,
tools,
if you can do it, of course it requires time. And the question is that if you can make that time, and let's say you don't have that much money or no money at all, then you have to put in the time into it yourself.
Okay.
Now, the team is also as important, because the team could be family members or close friends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If they possess the skills that's required, like CapCut or like, I don't know, just going on TikTok or marketing, whatever it is, if they can do it and they really believe in you, and you've got them there, then 100% the team.
Yeah. I would also actually really recommend friends and family. Now, there is a fine line in business, admittedly, with friends and family, but I do think people that are already in your corner, that are prepared to support you and help you, and actually, as you've described, have a skill set in that given area that you need help in, then I would definitely think that leaning on those people and bringing them into your circle, into your ecosystem and your team is key.
Yeah, I think it's down to the individual or the artist and what resources that they have within them.
I also, on that note, I also think that when you say it's about the individual, you're right, because if we take an artist that's on the younger end of the spectrum and perhaps living with parents and less financial commitments, it becomes a little bit easier to manage your own project. You've got a bit more time, right?
A bit more time.
If you are the artist who also has to perhaps support what you're doing through third-party income, another job, essentially,
get yourself a job.
Yeah. You're now pushing any hours or up to 40 hours or more sometimes a week.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a little bit different to. Now here's the balance, because also now you've got someone perhaps with more expendable income than another. And for different reasons, it could be either of those two people, the younger person or the older person. But I suppose that also becomes a factor in terms of working with you and or the expendable time they may have to work by themselves and just get it done.
But what's common with both and all is just like, and what I encourage artists in all those situations that you mentioned is to see how far you can go by yourself. Do you know what I mean? What realistically can you do? If you're like, you know what, but give it a go. Don't completely dismiss it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
Give it a go.
Absolutely.
And see if you can do it.
Absolutely. Can I also say that I think that is really important from an artist's perspective, because you will need help. Let's just call it what it is. The biggest artists in the world are nothing but teams, right? Someone like Drake, for example, just by example, is feeding families.
Yeah.
In terms of they are living off of him because they are part of his team.
Yeah.
Right? His success is paying them an income. He's feeding families. So team essentially is where you need to go eventually. Having said that, I do believe that what you said in terms of do what you can is essential as well, because in this world, it's easy to get ripped off. There's we discussed before we sat down here, someone popping into your DM saying, I can post you around the world for $20.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And there's lots of that happening in this climate right now, which is incentivizing, I've only got £20 to spend on this, so let me just try that, which is actually, as we said, detrimental to your career. So, in this time, in this place that we find ourselves now, with artists being able to so easily create their own content and so easily access apps, I think it's important that they go as far as they can with developing their own content before engaging in other people's services, at least, because one, you have a grip on your own creativity, what it is that you do represent, and equally what it is you don't represent through the visual content that you're creating, but also an idea of what it really looks like to do this stuff. Because if it takes you 10 hours, and admittedly you'll get quicker at certain things as you do them over time, but if a certain task, if the average edit of your video is actually taking you 10 hours to do all the cuts and so on and so forth, eventually you'll understand why someone is charging you X amount of money to do it for you, because it does take hours and it does take time and it does take knowledge.
Yeah.
And so again, to have an idea of what it takes helps you then identify who can really do it and the value of that person doing it.
Yeah. You see, the thing is, I'm a creative, right? And exactly, I went through that route. Exactly what you said, to the point where, like, I was just like, shit, okay, so I know how much you charge for someone to do an edit or filming, because I know how much time it's basically taking and stuff. You see, for me, I'm a creative, and creativity does not just stop with making music. You see, with the artists, a lot of artists, I mean, we'll say a lot of them, but a good majority of up and coming artists, to a certain extent, the creation of music is amazing. Yeah, I love it. Me as an artist, I love it. And then it's all about putting those visuals to those music. That's also like creativity in its own right, just creating visuals that represents the music, the mood, the story, what you're trying to communicate. Same energy. But then it doesn't just stop with making the music. Even just how to promote and market it, that as well is a lot of creativity goes into that. You've got your standard thing. You've got to have all these assets but how do you roll it out? What type of assets are you going to be using and stuff like that? Creativity never stops. But it's like you said earlier, that an artist might do all of that, and then they might just have somebody goes on Instagram and DMs them, says, look, I can do all around the world for like $20. And what you said was like, well, I've only got like $20 left anyway, so I'm just going to swing in it. It's like, to me, that's a real shame, to be honest. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, you've done this creative music, you've done this amazing visuals, but to get it around to people, you've only got like $20. So when somebody says I can do it for $20, you're like, yep, done.
Yeah.
You got to use that same level of creativity. So like, understanding how like marketing works, you'll be in the same situation where it'll be like, okay, now I understand how it works and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it requires time.
It really does. And can I say that there are I know a select few people that have actually ruined releases by opting in for cheap options.
Of course.
In that they've been like the obvious bots that are helping this gain views or numbers have been detected by the platform, and the platform's gone, no, get it off, we don't want that. And I have known that to affect a few artists, and so it's like it can actually be really damaging, especially as you've described. If you spent all of that time working on this product and then all of that time creating these visuals, to then go and blow it on some really obvious, cheap and criminal sort of awareness campaigns, I think that it's really detrimental. So you're making it so sophisticated for them by even saying awareness campaigns. You know
well,
what well, that's what they're selling, though, isn't it? But they're selling you an awareness campaign, but what they're actually giving you is quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And in fact, you'll speak on this, but it can be damaging in that the data, the analytics that now come from that are also no good for you. You can't work with that.
Yeah.
If it says all of your streams have come from some random town in Brazil, shout out Brazil, by the way. But if it's, do you know what I mean? It's you've got a million streams that have come from this little town where no one's actually got internet or streaming. No disrespect, but it's just like, how have you guys? You've really now messed up your analytics for your whole profile.
Yeah.
So it's quite dangerous as well if you mess around with the wrong stuff.
This is what I'm saying, like, when it comes to the promotion side of things, if you get somebody on a DMs basically saying, I can give you something like about, like 100,000 streams for $20. If it's too good to be true, then it's flipping not true. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like you go on Fiverr and you get one of those playlists and they said, look, we're 100% bot free. All of that. The bot situation is completely out of hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's completely out of hand because you've also got other instances where you're promoting a song and somebody would put your song onto their own playlist. They're very, very cunning in what they do because you can't stop people putting your songs on their playlist.
No, of course not.
So what they do, they'll put your song on their own playlist, and then, which is obviously botted, and then they'll, like, as soon as it's on there, they'll run those bots, and then you will see on your Spotify for artists like, oh my God, like 54 streams running at the same time, and then the next day you see the results and you see like a massive spike, and eventually sometimes they even hide it, but how they work is that they know that you will notice the spike or the increase of streams, and then through Spotify for artists you can see what website it's basically been linked to, so you can just click on it and you go on what playlist that it's been linked to. So you click on it, you see the playlist, and then you click on that, and then like they'll have on the Spotify playlist they'll have like an email or like a website, because what they'll do, they'll put it on the playlist and then they'll switch it off, so they'll be like, to try and capture the people that pay attention to their stats on Spotify for artists, for them to go to the playlist, they'll be like, yo, you got these streams on and stuff, but switched off, and you let them know that, and then they'll be like, yeah, don't worry, so we'll put it back on for an extra like $50. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
they're not directly selling it to you, they're kind of like poking you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are obviously botted.
Big problems.
So yeah, I mean the whole situation, but there's definitely ways of like, notifying Spotify, let them know that this particular playlist, you have nothing to do with it, literally is botted, like, and they have some sort of like playlist kind of form where you can put it in, and and then it'll eventually get taken off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Side question.
Yeah.
What's your view on boosting posts?
I think from marketers, the digital marketers, especially when it comes to meta ads and everything, they will know exactly what I'm talking about. I feel like, how can I put this in a different way? For me, it's like boosting post on the front end where everyone can, the blue button. It's more, you're more throwing away money to Meta. Yeah,
it's like vanity.
It's so convenient and stuff, but for me it's all about controls. So for example, like I started off on a PC with making videos called with Windows Movie Maker. Yeah, and I'm sure there's one for the Mac and everything, and it's convenient. Yeah, easy. But when I started moving on to like, Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro at the time and everything, I was like, I got more controls. I can control things and stuff. I don't want to spend my money there. I want to spend my money here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the blue button gives you those elements, but what it is, they give you things that makes them more money, where if I do it on the back end, I can control where I want to put my money, who exactly that I want to target, and stuff like that. You know, it's like the Premiere Pro of the marketing side of things. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I suppose it's kind of like the ability to target the people that are most likely to enjoy your content and therefore come back as repeat customers, versus we just got someone to have a look at your content and here's some views for you to go celebrate over.
Yeah, I'll say it like this: the blue button, boost button is probably a good starting point just to get understanding.
I suppose, yeah. I suppose from, if nothing else, if you had the budget and you were prepared to go down that route, I suppose what you would start to see at least is who is receptive to your content being boosted. Yeah. At least. And then you could potentially retarget those people if necessary.
Yes. If you can find it.
It's a bit long way, a long way around.
If you can find it, but you know, if you go down the other route, there's so much more controls.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even controls in the type of people, what platforms and everything that they're coming from, you know, what cities and ages and all that type of stuff. You know, there's a lot more information, you know, on there.
All right. Next question. What assets does a producer or an artist need to release a song?
I mean, I can only do it from, I mean, there's a lot of assets, but will do it from, let's say if somebody comes to me and they want me to promote their song, kind of thing.
Yeah, let's talk from a minimum perspective as well.
Okay, so I would say basically a range from 5 till 7.
Can you just 5 to 7? Let's hold on to that.
Okay.
Can you just, as you go through this, can you just summarize what assets are? Okay.
Good point. So assets for me, I'm talking more about videos.
Okay. Video content.
Yeah. Of course, I also will take images as well of the artwork and stuff like that. For sure. That probably will class as one asset, to be honest, right?
Okay.
In order for me to make ads to target people with those assets, in order to entice them to go and listen to your song on Spotify, watch your video on YouTube and so forth, or go and buy some merchandise. That's one piece of asset. I would say visuals are definitely important. So there could be a music video that you've done. Obviously, it needs to be formatted in vertical. We can take horizontals, but ideally vertical videos. Just because where I'm going to be placing it, the placements of that, they've got their own particular formats that's needed. You can even do like a lip syncing, somewhere random or wherever you feel comfortable, but not stylized. I'll say the music videos are stylized as you can get. Something that's raw, it could be like lip syncing or even like performing live, you know. It could be like a behind the scenes, you know. Of
how long do these pieces need to be roughly?
Well, I would say I'll say like about a minute, but for me, if you have a minute of that, that's great. For me, I will be formatting them into 30 seconds and 15-second clips.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So 30 seconds for reels and feeds, and 15 seconds for story. So for every one asset, there'll be 3 different formats. They'll need to be formatted in 3 ways.
For every asset, it needs to be formatted in 3 different ways?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying that you would need a minimum of 5 to 7 assets to just kind of get things up and running and go through. Okay.
And you know, a lot of people always say to me, so why do I need this amount of things?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's basically because, for one, you don't really know what the target audience is going to gravitate to in order to get them to go and listen to your song, get your merchandise, go to your website, whatever, right? So you got to test them, you know? That's why you got to have this variation of images or shall we say assets, videos and images to see which of like your target audience, which one do they like the most to give you the cheapest clicks, you know, to go to your song and so forth and so forth. Yeah?
Right, yeah.
And the ones that are not doing well, you remove from it. You remove from the thing.
And by not doing well, you mean they're expensive clicks?
Expensive clicks, if you put it in a very basic sense.
In the most basic term. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need a lot. And in terms in content in social media, you need even more. Do you know what I mean? To a certain extent.
Well, yeah.
You know, it's very hungry for it.
It's a lot. It's a lot for someone to do.
Yeah.
You know, especially if we talk about all the different platforms you then have to post that content to.
As you know, in different formats.
Exactly that. Hence, I'm assuming that's why you take each asset and turn it into 3 formats to start, and then you kind of go from there.
Because when I'm advertising on Meta, I need a reel, which it could be like, it could be shorter, but I'm saying 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's got its own format, and even where you can place text and logos and everything. You got to, you know. I also will be placing it on as a feed, you know.
Yeah.
And that has got its own formats as well. But that you can also put horizontal ones, but I usually put vertical or 4x5. And then story, and that could be 30 seconds or even longer or even shorter. And the other one is the stories, which is 15 seconds.
Right.
So that's where I need it. I'm advertising on those placements, reels, stories, and feeds on Instagram as well as Facebook.
Right. Okay. And can you just, as kind of summatively as possible, explain the whole idea of gathering this data to then target who this data has indicated should be targeted?
What, in terms of how to analyze the data?
No, not necessarily how to analyze it, but like what it is that you're actually doing with these assets that an artist goes, I see what, because you're not necessarily immediately sending people to the song. I mean, you are, but you're also trying to refine who you choose to send to the song.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Along the route.
Yeah, I mean, again, is definitely data analysis to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. You see, because a campaign kind of consists of an objective. Yeah, you set an objective of what you want it. So mine is a cost per conversion. Somebody who has clicked twice via landing page in order to listen to a song on Spotify.
And by click twice, just to clarify, you mean they've gone from one page to another and maybe done that again?
Yeah, so they've seen the ad,
clicked on it.
It goes to a landing page, listen now on Spotify, which says listen now on Spotify. It's got a button there, click to it, and then you're listening to the thing on Spotify.
Okay, so they've shown 2 levels of commitment to listen to your song, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So that's the objective, right? And I'm doing it in a very late...
To find people like that.
Yes.
The objective is to find people that click twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can set your audience target. You say, I wanted them to be between 18 and 64. You know, you can set like the countries where you want to target them to, you know. Mm-hmm. You can set like their interests. You know, so on Meta, you can also put in the interest. So, for example, that will be where you put your similar artists. You know,
okay.
So if you're like similar to like Michael Jackson, you obviously put Michael Jackson, and that's basically targeting Michael Jackson's fans. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Okay.
But so what I'm trying to say, you can put in like hip hop, rap, or R&B, pop as interests, and you're basically targeting that audience.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
off the bat.
And then at the same time, and of that, at the same time, I'm also targeting that audience with at least 5 to 7 creatives. All right. So I'm looking at the data and I'm saying, okay, I'm looking and checking to see what countries are converting to streams. Then I go into the other side of Spotify for artists, and I start looking to see. I target this country. Is the UK getting streams? Is like United States getting streams and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
But not only just streams, are they getting saves? Because with our type of campaign, the saves and the playlist is unique to everywhere else. Do you know what I mean? Shall I say, is more unique than just playlists as well.
Yeah, that save element is like a super fan almost.
It's like a super fan because you said it earlier on. 2 clicks is what? A commitment. Committed.
Yeah.
It's easy to get clicks
Yeah.
and go straight there, but 2 clicks, somebody has got a very, very high intent that, like, you know what? I want to listen to this
in
artist.
this day and age, absolutely.
And those people are the ones that will save and will engage. I call them engaged listeners, potential engaged listeners, because I know their pattern on the other side on Spotify, and then I can then say, wait a minute, Poland, Brazil, United States, UK, and Australia, I can see their unique characteristics of what's happening in those countries. Yeah. But then I'll see other countries where I don't see no streams at all. I'll see some, and stuff like that. So, then I look on the other side, it's like I spent about £2 on that country, and it's not connecting to streams. So I remove those countries.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the same way of like the assets, the ones that's really expensive, I remove those based on what is converting, what isn't converting.
Right, because on the basis it's expensive, it means that it's almost like not a natural customer. They're not just happy to be there. They're almost they're a difficult person to get their attention.
It could be a number of things why there's no streams, because you're probably targeting in an area or the person that necessarily is not a member of Spotify, a paying customer on Spotify. Yeah.
Right.
So when they click on the link, it will just go into a random track, right? It'll be on a shuffle mode.
Right.
So it's a wasted thing.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to think of those things and that, and sometimes maybe it's some of those people are just distracted by other things.
Yeah.
Like I said, somebody who's clicked twice,
A lot of factors.
is committed.
They're committed.
They've gone down that funnel to be like, yeah, I'm committed and stuff.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's switch lanes a little bit. So let's put you in the position where you have you're ahead of schedule, and I think we both agree that in this climate you need to be ahead of schedule in terms of having your content. You don't want to chase your own back in terms of getting your stuff out there. So you're ahead of schedule. You have multiple tracks ready. Is it worth doing an album or a multiple individual single track rollout?
You see, I always come down to the same thing. Yeah, it's always down to what the artist wants. I understand the whole nostalgia, and I don't mean it in a rude way, but before having the album coming out, it's like the one. Yeah. Like when Dr. Dre's album or when Snoop's first album came out, I was like, yo, I get it. But at the same time, listeners' habits have changed a lot to a certain extent,
Yes.
and the industry to a certain extent had adapted to that. Do you know what I mean? More independent artists and stuff had adapted to a different way of releasing stuff.
Yeah.
You see, for me, it's kind of like, I think an album is probably good to have, or an EP is probably good to have towards the end. Yeah. But you still release stuff, and then the album is probably like some extra bonus tracks that people haven't heard. Do you know what I mean?
Right, sort of gluing them all together.
Gluing them all
the
together.
End of a series of releases.
Yeah. But at the same time, people just don't even want to release albums. They just keep on releasing because, that's also another thing as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think if you have enough tracks and you can do both, then great, which is a weird thing to think about in terms of a cycle, but it's great if you can do both. But if you have enough tracks, I suppose a consistent rollout over the course of a year with multiple tracks, as opposed to one release of an album and 3-month drop off, is probably better for engagement and upping your profile.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like you can do it in this way. you got to kind of factor in what is actually involved to release an album financially, you know, in a way of what you want, you know, to try and achieve. Yeah. And sometimes you got to, like I said, you got to be very kind of realistic, and even just, you know, sometimes people will be like, oh God, I need to get all these songs before I release anything. Sometimes you're stifling your own growth by doing that.
Agreed. Yeah. That's interesting.
And don't get me wrong, I've been one of those people that have done that.
I mean, it is part of the journey to do that, to figure that out as well, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that, you know, you just got to be, it's down to the artist what they want to do. For me personally, I would release songs. I would release as many songs as possible, because at the same time, you're kind of like providing more data, you know that, and also consistency is always a good thing.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So for example, if you're like you do the album and you just disappear again for a bit, what about you got a whole bed of songs? Why don't you just release one song, then after whatever, if it's like once every 8 weeks, you release another song, put effort on that, or just think, okay, you know what, before the album drops, let me just see what are my favorite tracks that I want to drop, like 3 to 5 songs that I want to drop prior to that, you know?
Yeah.
And you may not necessarily, you might say, okay, after the 3rd song, you know what, it's time to drop the album, you can do that. Or after the 5th song, time to drop the album, then basically just do that.
Right.
But like, I personally would even do like a set of organic testing and like have your songs and put them out in terms of on your socials. Give them 15-second segments. You don't have to give them the whole thing. Give them 15 seconds. Like upload that with, let's say, one image, but one image, and each time you upload that image, it's a different song. You know, in terms of thumbnail, or if it's a different song. And seeing what people are gravitating to organically, or even you can even do that as ads. Yeah. And then let's say you're stuck with what you want to release first, you know, but then you might be surprised that people might be preferring this one organically, or people might be preferring that one with ads. Maybe organic first, then let me just test it with ads as well and see if it's the same thing, or what are your top 5 or top 3 that you want to kind of, and then provided that if that basically goes with your own hunch that track 1 and track 3 are my favorites too, do you know what I mean? Then, you know, at least you can then say, right, I need to focus, let's say £500 or whatever it is, you know, 300, 500 pounds, 1,000 on this particular song, because it's so clear from the data that it's getting a lot of traction. So maybe I should get more assets for this one, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what, I would like to say on that note as well, that I think, again, over the life cycle of an artist, releasing albums is absolutely fine. But I think as an artist that may be newer to the scene, or a producer that might be newer to the scene, I think you have to have an audience there before you go doing that. Because if you, for example, you have a really low following, to release an album doesn't necessarily encourage a bigger following. And in fact, what happens is you just get you get the very small crowd come to listen to the first track or 2, and you'll look at the drop off of the album and it's like track 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, mixtape, EP, whatever it is, got no plays or very little plays. And it's like, actually, you didn't have enough people there or enough excitement there to warrant their attention for that amount of time.
Yeah.
So I think if you haven't already stimulated an audience that's ready to receive it, I think to build an audience single by single over an extended period of time is one of the better ways to do it.
Yes, definitely one of the better ways to do it. And again, like I was saying to you earlier, it's really down to the individual and what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally would do that. Build an audience, release, build an audience, build the audience and stuff like that, in the same way that you do it in social media and everything with organics and stuff. But however, obviously you know how much time will go into that. Not to say that they can't drop an album, but they can drop an album so at least it's there. But then if they want people to listen to that album, then you got to do those same songs while the album has dropped. You got to then promote them.
Yeah.
And then if people like it, then they come back and they'll be listening to other songs on the album.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I suppose
so there's different routes in how you can do.
It sounds like a lot more work, if I'm honest with you. Obviously, it is. There's a lot more songs. Each song has its own, can potentially have its own audience.
Yeah.
And bring people into the collective album. But it sounds like there's obviously a lot more plates spinning, if you like, at one time, and a lot more things to manage if you're going to do a good job of it.
Yeah.
And if we speak about assets, it seems like you would probably need a lot more assets for an album than you would.
Yeah, I mean, you will need to have all your assets for the album. We're just talking about one single.
Yeah.
Let alone, you know. So, in a way, that should basically be like, you know what, fam, I'm gonna do the single thing. But again, I was like, thinking about it. I want to drop a track. You know?
Yeah, I think having reviewed the budget, we're gonna just go with the single release.
The single release.
If that's all right. Yeah. Okay.
And you know, there's this thing called a waterfall release as well, which you know about that.
Talk us through that though, please.
I mean, oh gosh, I mean, there's so many different. But in a very layman's term, what you can do is like you drop a song, and then the next song that you drop is kind of like a growing EP. Yeah.
Right.
So you drop another song. So in that is attached. So the first song you dropped is now at the bottom, like number, you know, at the bottom, and the new one is at the top, and then it keeps on building up when you drop songs, to the point where it's like an EP or full EP or an album.
Right. So basically, it's it's the same album. You've started off with an album that essentially has one track on day one.
Yeah.
But by the end of your releases, the album now is populated with as many songs as you had on the album.
Yeah.
But you're saying there's a way to link that when uploading your songs to your DSP.
So every new song is linked to that album's linked and then keeps on growing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's like the waterfall release.
The waterfall release. I think that's a really good. I think in today's mix and ecosystem in this industry, I think that's a really good way forward.
Or another one that they could do as well. That's to say, there's so many different options. You can grow your own playlist. Put your songs, and this is probably a very good middle ground between, let's say you want to do ads to grow your track or ads to basically grow a playlist with your tracks on there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then you're getting followers on that playlist, as you know, on top.
Yeah.
So it's like you're then building audiences for every song that you drop. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I also, the idea of that as well is actually really good for the artist as well, because if you start to actually create playlists around your song, what you're also doing is you should be finding other artists and other music which is similar to yours as well. So you're also kind of finding an audience that will enjoy this type of music, and yours is in there. And I know it's a very, very powerful way to engage with audiences who are just really music lovers. You know, it's interesting because it is difficult to sell someone an album as opposed to a single, but interestingly enough, that Spotify, that Apple Music customer is on there for extended periods of time. You know, when I listen to my music in the gym, that's at least an hour that I have got tracks rolling that I've added to my user playlist.
Yeah.
Now that playlist is filled with music that, in this case, stimulates my workout, but it's
the mood.
Yeah, the mood, exactly. But I'm on there so I am on there long enough to listen to an album, and so the artist, the can kind of you can get easily involved in sharing your music and also letting people know more about your style, more about the artist you're into, more about the artists that are similar to you by kind of adapting this playlist.
But it's not only you're letting people know, you're also letting the DSPs like Spotify and Apple Music know as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially you're not even letting them. They're taking it whether you like it or not. They're looking at the data, and they'd be like, okay, this person is quite similar to this person, so for this particular artist, because he's put his song onto a playlist, that's got similar artists, similar kind of moods and stuff like that. So Spotify is kind of like learning from that. So when it comes to if you've got good enough engagement and it decides to give you a Release Radar or Discover Weekly or even a radio, it will then it will recommend it to those people that it understands would like your music. Yeah. So even it's like a win-win situation when you're putting your song onto your own playlist and you're growing it. Is because and you're putting your friends or people that are similar to you and stuff on there. Is giving rich data for their algorithmic recommendation.
Right. So yeah, really is win-win.
Really is a win-win. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just think that every artist needs to really pay attention to their data. It's readily there.
The analytics, yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of them just look at the most superficial part. Like one artist was basically really worried about their monthly listeners. My monthly listeners and blah blah blah. And I said, you know what? The monthly listeners is such a superficial way of looking at things, because it only lasts 28 days. It resets every 28 days or whatever. So each day is kind of different. If you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And what you really need to be looking at is your active listeners, yeah, and your active audience, and that's in Spotify for artists. That's your real hardcore, real hardcore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that is not for everyone else to see. That's privately for you to see, so you can really understand your audience and who they are, where they are, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's things like that. That I feel that artists needs to. The data's there. It may be hidden somewhere, but it's everything that's so readily available for you to see. It's superficial. You have to, even on Meta, on Instagram and Facebook, people look at the app kind of like analytics and everything. But if you go to Meta Business Suite, you will see a whole wealth of information to help you. But they're looking at likes and comments and stuff like that, which is good.
Which is good
to get an engagement, but it's not as rich as what you can see if you know where to look for it.
Well said. Okay, listen, last question.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's a bit of a, maybe not a big one, but what does an artist need to do? Given everything we've spoken about today, what does an artist need to do, a producer need to do, a creative, if you like, need to do in today's market to stand out? Which is a stupid question, because everyone's creative enough to think about this, but what would you recommend things or the thing that would help someone stand out?
Okay. It's quite a simple answer, to be honest.
Okay.
All right. You just got to be yourself, man. Be your true, authentic self. Yeah. Don't be the person that you think you should be. Be your true, authentic self, and have no care about what people think. If it's something that makes you happy, yeah, and you're not hurting anyone, but something that makes you happy, do you know what I'm saying? Be who you want to be, who you are, okay? But it's very hard for some artists, because they may not even know, because they've been ogling at other artists to try and be like them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just like you have to. That's where your uniqueness comes, right? But as well as that, once you've found that, yeah, and I said really have no care, because people will comment about your stuff. But I'll leave you with this, yeah. There's about 9 billion people in this world, right? Yeah. Not everyone is going to like your shit, yeah. But the great thing about it, we can find those people. You can find those people that like your shit, yeah. You just need to find them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if it's just a niche is the best things ever. It's the best. and you just grow. Once you find those people, you just grow it. Yeah. Don't be like, oh, I want to be like Drake, or I want to be like, Rihanna, or I want to be like flipping, I just don't, just anyone. Be who you want to be. Because one thing is for sure, there's a lot of kind of shit out there, but the people who are truly authentic, like, people will know, and people gravitate to that.
Yeah.
And such, people could tell when you're being fake, but if you're just being your authentic self, people gravitate to it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well said, bro.
Yeah, man.
Well said. Yeah, well said, bro. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me on, man.
We're gonna speak again. There's lots more to talk about, but yeah, thank you for all the information. Thank you for the data. If people want to find you, how can people kind of reach out to you at the moment if they want to come talk to you about your services and stuff? Where can we find you?
Well, so far, I mean, I probably would say, because I'll talk to you offline when Is It a Hit will be coming out. But just Made by Nana D. That's it. On all platforms. Made by Nana D.
Peace, guys.